The flight begins. A connection between flight attendants, duo W love story. The emergency lights flickered on as the plane hit another pocket of turbulence, and Maya's hands trembled as she gripped the galley counter, not from fear of the shaking aircraft, but from the realization that had just crashed into her heart with the force of a lightning strike. Across the narrow aisle, through the chaos of rattling carts and swaying curtains, stood Sophia, her senior flight attendant, reaching out instinctively to steady a nervous passenger with such gentle grace that Maya felt something inside her crack open, a truth she had been running from at 30,000 feet for the past 6 months. Finally breaking through the clouds of denial, Maya had chosen this life deliberately. The constant motion, the ever-changing cities, the temporary nature of every interaction. After her engagement had fallen apart 2 years ago, she had walked away from her stable teaching job in Portland and applied to become a flight attendant, convincing herself that she needed freedom, that she needed to escape the suffocating expectations of the life she had been building. Her mother had cried when she announced her decision. Her father had called it irresponsible, and her ex-fiancé David had looked at her with something close to pity, as if he knew she was running from something she couldn't name. But Maya had boarded that first training flight with her head held high, determined to prove them all wrong, determined to prove to herself that she was fine, that she was just exploring, that she was living her best life. The reality of the job had been simultaneously harder and easier than she expected. The irregular hours, the jet lag, the demanding passengers, the constant smile she had to maintain even when her feet ached and her back screamed for rest, all of it wore on her in ways she hadn't anticipated. But there was also something liberating about it, about existing in these temporary spaces between destinations, about serving people she would never see again, about sleeping in hotel rooms that held no memories. She made friends easily enough with the other flight attendants, grabbed late-night pizza in random cities, shared makeup tips in airport bathrooms, but she kept everyone at a comfortable distance, never letting anyone get close enough to ask the questions she wasn't ready to answer. Then Sophia had joined their regular crew 3 months ago, transferring from the international routes, and something in Maya's carefully constructed world had shifted. Sophia was 35. With dark hair she wore in an elegant bun, warm brown eyes that seemed to notice everything, and a calm competence that made even the most chaotic flights feel manageable. She had a way of handling difficult passengers that was both firm and kind, a way of remembering crew members, coffee orders, and asking about their sick parents, and remembering the names of their dogs. She wore a thin silver bracelet on her left wrist that she touched sometimes when she was thinking, and she had a small scar above her right eyebrow that Maya had found herself staring at more times than she could count. Maya had told herself it was just admiration, just professional respect. Sophia was good at her job, that was all. Sophia made everyone feel seen and valued. That was just who she was. There was nothing special about the way Maya's heart rate increased when Sophia walked into the pre-flight briefing. Nothing meaningful about how Maya had started volunteering for the same route Sophia was assigned to. Nothing significant about the way Maya's entire day felt brighter when Sophia smiled at her. She was just being friendly. They were just colleagues. That was all it could ever be. But 6 months of denial had led to this moment. This turbulent afternoon over the Midwest, when Maya had watched Sophia calm a terrified passenger with such tenderness, had seen the way Sophia's whole face softened with compassion, and had felt something so powerful surge through her chest that she couldn't pretend anymore. She wasn't just admiring Sophia. She wasn't just being friendly. This feeling that had been building like a storm system, this ache that settled in her ribs every time Sophia laughed, this longing that kept her awake in anonymous hotel rooms staring at the ceiling, this was something she had been taught to fear, something she had spent her whole life pushing down, something that terrified her more than any amount of turbulence ever could. The flight landed smoothly despite the rough air, and Maya moved through her post-landing duties on autopilot, checking overhead bins, picking up abandoned newspapers, smiling at deplaning passengers while her mind spun in circles. She had grown up in a conservative household where this was never discussed, never acknowledged as a possibility. She had dated boys in high school because that was what you did, had fallen into a relationship with David because he was kind and stable and her parents approved, had said yes when he proposed because it seemed like the logical next step. She had never let herself question whether she was truly happy, whether the absence of passion meant something, whether the fact that she felt more alive. Watching romantic movies about women than she ever felt with David was a sign she had been ignoring. The crew gathered their bags and headed toward the shuttle, and Maya found herself walking next to Sophia, their shoulders almost touching in the narrow jet bridge. Sophia smelled like lavender and something citrus, and Maya had to focus on putting one foot in front of the other. They had a 3-hour layover before their next flight, and several crew members were planning to grab dinner at the airport restaurant. Maya knew she should go back to her hotel room, should put distance between herself and these feelings that were threatening to overwhelm her. But when Sophia turned and asked if she was joining them, those warm brown eyes meeting hers, Maya found herself nodding. Dinner was a blur of conversation she barely registered, pasta she barely tasted, while she sat across from Sophia and tried not to stare, tried not to notice the way Sophia's hands moved when she talked, tried not to feel her heart clench when Sophia laughed at someone's joke. The other flight attendants eventually drifted away to check into their hotels or explore the terminal, and then it was just Maya and Sophia sitting across from each other at a table littered with empty plates and crumpled napkins, the restaurant slowly emptying around them. Sophia looked at her with an expression Maya couldn't quite read, something gentle and knowing and a little sad. She reached across the table and touched Maya's hand, just briefly, just her fingertips grazing Maya's knuckles, but it sent electricity straight to Maya's heart. Sophia asked if she was okay, said she had seemed distracted lately, said she wanted Maya to know that if she ever needed to talk about anything, she was there. And Maya felt tears prick her eyes because Sophia's kindness was somehow worse than indifference would have been. Because Sophia's concern made her want to confess everything. And because she knew that saying these feelings out loud would change everything, would make them real, would force her to acknowledge who she really was. She excused herself quickly, mumbling something about being tired, about needing to rest before their next flight, and practically fled to the bathroom. She locked herself in a stall and pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to figure out how she had let things get this far. She had built her whole adult life around being someone who fit in, someone who followed the expected path, someone who didn't rock the boat. Admitting this truth about herself meant tearing down that entire identity, meant facing her family's disappointment, meant accepting that she had wasted years trying to be someone she wasn't, meant stepping into an unknown future that terrified her. But as she stood there in that airport bathroom, fluorescent lights humming overhead, she realized that she was already living a lie, already exhausted from pretending, already lonely despite being surrounded by people every day. The thought of going back to that half-life, of continuing to deny what she felt, of watching Sophia from a distance and never allowing herself to be honest, suddenly seemed more terrifying than any alternative. She thought about the passenger Sophia had comforted earlier, how Sophia's compassion had been so freely given, and she wondered what it would be like to receive that tenderness, to be seen fully by someone who truly understood her, to stop running and finally allow herself to land. Maya washed her face, fixed her makeup, and walked back out into the terminal with shaking legs and a racing heart. She found Sophia still sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone, and when Sophia looked up and saw her, there was such warmth in her eyes that Maya felt brave enough to sit back down. The words came out in a rush, clumsy and scared but honest. She told Sophia that she had been struggling with something, that she was figuring out parts of herself she had ignored for too long, that she didn't know how to navigate these feelings, but she couldn't pretend they didn't exist anymore. She didn't say Sophia's name, didn't explicitly confess the specific nature of her realization, but the implication hung in the air between them, fragile and terrifying and real. Sophia listened without interrupting, her expression soft and understanding, and when Maya finally ran out of words, Sophia reached across the table again and took her hand properly this time, threading their fingers together. She told Maya that she understood, that coming to terms with your identity was one of the hardest and bravest things a person could do, that there was no timeline for self-discovery, that Maya didn't have to have everything figured out right now. And then, so quietly that Maya almost missed it, Sophia said that she had come out herself 10 years ago, that it had been the scariest and most liberating experience of her life, and that watching Maya struggle these past few months had reminded her of her own journey. Maya stared at their intertwined hands, at the way Sophia's thumb was gently stroking her knuckles, and felt something unknot in her chest. She wasn't alone. She didn't have to navigate this terrifying new territory by herself. Sophia squeezed her hand and said they should probably head to their gate, that their next flight would board soon, but that this conversation didn't have to end here, that they could talk more when they both had time and space to breathe. Maya nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat, and they walked together through the terminal, their shoulders touching, something new and fragile and hopeful beginning to unfold between them. The next flight was a short hop to Denver, barely 90 minutes in the air, and Maya moved through her duties with a strange mixture of terror and lightness. She kept catching Sophia's eye across the cabin, and each time Sophia smiled at her, small and private and just for her, Maya felt a little more certain that she was finally heading in the right direction. She didn't know what would happen next, didn't know how she would tell her family, didn't know if this connection with Sophia would develop into something more or remain a catalyst for her own self-discovery, but for the first time in 2 years, she felt like she was actually living instead of just existing. They landed in Denver as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and as they walked through the terminal together, Maya thought about all the destinations she had flown to, all the cities she had visited trying to outrun herself. She realized now that she hadn't needed to travel anywhere to find what she was looking for. The journey she needed to take was internal. The destination was self-acceptance, and the flight path required courage she hadn't known she possessed. Before we reach the end of this journey together, if this story has touched your heart, if Maya's struggle resonates with you, if you believe in the power of authenticity and the courage it takes to live your truth, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means more than you know, and it helps us continue sharing stories that matter, stories about real people facing real challenges, stories about love in all its beautiful forms. In the hotel that night, Maya lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, but this time she wasn't running from her thoughts. She pulled out her phone and found a message from Sophia, just a simple heart emoji and a reminder that she wasn't alone. Maya smiled, saved the message, and closed her eyes, feeling something like peace settle over her, for the first time in longer than she could remember. The next morning, they had a flight back to their home base, and as Maya sat in the jump seat during takeoff, watching Sophia run through the safety demonstration with practiced ease, she thought about how every ending was also a beginning, how every landing made the next flight possible. She didn't have all the answers yet, might never have all the answers, but she had taken the first step, had spoken her truth out loud, had stopped running long enough to let herself be found. Please comment below and share with us. Have you ever had a moment when you realized you needed to stop running from yourself and finally embrace who you truly are? Your stories inspire us and create a community where everyone feels seen and valued. As the plane climbed higher, breaking through the clouds into clear blue sky, Maya looked out the window and smiled. She had spent so long afraid of falling, but now she understood that sometimes you had to let yourself fall in order to learn how to fly. This was just the beginning, the first chapter of a story she was finally ready to write, and whatever came next, she would face it with honesty, with courage, and with the knowledge that she deserved to love and be loved exactly as she was. The flight had begun, and Maya was finally ready to see where it would take her.